So, Problemista is a new dramatic comedy starring Julio Juarez, who also writes and directs this film. And it's a very odd little film. I mean, it's an A24 film, so you expect them to be a little bit odd. It kind of has like that same tone that you've come to expect with their films, kind of like with like Dream Scenario from last year. But this is kind of like a fascinating film because it's filled with like odd characters and bizarre, surreal sequences that are never like fully explained, which I kind of dug because then it kind of like it feels a lot more trippy rather than easily explained. But there's another interesting dynamic to this film that I really want to focus on, but I think I should give the film its day in court first before I explain what makes the film so fascinating. So the film is about this young man, Alejandro, played by Juarez, who is an immigrant who has come to stay in New York and is hoping to strike it big as a toy designer. The problem is he's tried to pitch himself to Hasbro. Unfortunately, his toy ideas they seem too weird that Hasbro wouldn't take a shot on them. Specifically, he focuses on toys where the dynamic is not so much about, play, but almost kind of like learning like a moral lesson through the weirdest ways. Like they have like, I think like they showcase a lot of his designs, but they're weird stuff like a toy car where the tires slowly deflate over time. There's another one where he has like Cabbage Patch dolls, but they all have like anxiety about stuff they put on social media. So stuff that's meant to be relatable, but is still weird. And that's kind of like the vibe for the rest of the film because it does present stuff that is strange, that is weird, that does feel like that feels like you can't tell the difference between like fantasy and reality at several points, but it's all stuff that's relatable. And that's what makes it so fascinating on that level. So while Alejandro is struggling for work in New York, he's just gotten fired from his last job at a cryogenic facility, and he finds himself trying to get a new job with this woman Elizabeth, played by Tilda Swinton. And she is just a frantic, messy woman who is trying to preserve the legacy of her husband, who was cryogenically frozen because he had a cancer that couldn't be treated, and he was a bit of an artist. He's played by RZA, which you get to see a little bit of him in the film. But he had this whole thing about wanting to paint eggs, just nothing but painting eggs in the most like kind of like playful and strange way that's kind of adorable at times. So Elizabeth's whole deal is she wants to set up a gallery by reacquiring all of his paintings and kind of like making this big tribute to his legacy. And Elizabeth kind of like, tells Alejandro, like, look, if you help me out with this, I'll help you sign some papers that'll help you keep you in the US so you can keep pursuing your dream of wanting to develop toys. So they actually form a kind of a very interesting bond here. It has its hills and valleys, and Alejandro is still struggling for money during that time because Elizabeth doesn't really pay Alejandro, so he struggles for work, taking the oddest of jobs, renting out his room to people, just browsing Craigslist and feeling like there's nothing that he can do to, maintain his citizenship, while also wanting to be independent. Like there are several points where like his mother keeps calling him saying, hey, do you need money? I'll help you out. It's like, no, I can do this. I can do it on my own. Don't worry about it. I can handle this. When in reality, he's struggling. He's struggling to find work. He's struggling to connect with people and just, struggling to maneuver his way through the world, similar to the way that Elizabeth does. Now, here is where I find the film most intriguing. So this film becomes way more fascinating if you look at it on the level of Alejandro representing autism and Elizabeth representing ADHD. Because they never specifically say that they have these diagnoses. But you can kind of like see it in the way that they interact. Like Alejandro is very laser focused on his goals. He becomes, he's a little bit more reserved. He's not emotionless, but he's still, struggling to prove himself and finds it hard to do. at several times, and tries to find little ways to cope with reality, and the kind of like the ways that he walks around, and like the way that he just asserts himself in that way. Whereas with Elizabeth, she's all over the place. She gets lost in thought several times. She can't let stuff go. She's, she has like a lot of attachment to stuff. Her purse is a mess. And she's, she can barely maintain like a conversation because she gets frantically lost and gets kind of like scared and angry with herself for not being able to keep everything together in her life. And she relies on old technology. She doesn't update it because she constantly gets distracted by everything. And just watching the film in that aspect where Alejandro has autism and Elizabeth has ADHD, the way that they come together is just kind of beautiful because like Alejandro is able to see the side of Elizabeth that no one else can see. Like even within Alejandro's mind, like within like his vision, in his like little trippy visions, he pretty much sees her as like a monster. But it's a monster that he wants to kind of like understand and try to, connect with. Like there's a beautiful moment where Elizabeth and Alejandro have just come out of a place where they're trying to get the paintings, and Elizabeth has lost her keys in her purse, and she's like, "Oh, where are my keys? Did they fall down? Oh, I'm pretty sure that person there stole it. Where can my keys be?" And like Alejandro comes to the rescue and is basically like, "Well, why don't we just empty your purse one by one, and we can find the keys?" And he kind of like talks Elizabeth through that in a way that's not meant to be condescending, but just kind of like working it out the same way that he would work it out. And watching them connect on that level was just it was so cute and like and just warm and very comforting, while at the same time being still playfully silly and absurd with it. Like at one point, like he looks through her purse and he's like, oh, he finds like a huge chain of keys. It's like, oh, is it one of these? Like, no, those aren't the keys. And it's like, oh, why? Doesn't really question why there are more keys. Just like that's Elizabeth's nature. There's a lot of bizarre sequences in this film. Like I love how Craigslist is represented by like this almost kind of like Bacchus type, like dreamlike figure, played by Larry Owens, who's just like, come back to Craigslist, have you? It just like spouts off like all these like jobs and stuff you can buy. And there's even like a few surprising casting within here. Like you have Greta Lee off of Past Lives, having a small role in here of someone who has a bit of a history with Elizabeth and comes to terms with it. You have Isabella Rossellini being the narrator here, which is pretty fun. Small role, but still a fun one. And just like the weird places that this film goes to, and just doesn't relent at times. And it's not just within like the fantasy visions that Alejandro has, even though those are some of like the funniest moments in the film. Particularly, there's a scene where he's pleading on the phone for like an employee of Bank of America to help him realize that it's not fair how he was charged for trying to maintain his account, and that it's now in the red, and that there's nothing he can do about it. And he envisions himself being trapped under rocks, and this Bank of America employee just watching him, and he's just saying like, I'm not even asking you to fix anything. I just want you to acknowledge that this is not right, and that this should not be happening to me right now. That's all I want. And then he just envisions the Bank of America employee just saying, "I stand with Bank of America," and shooting him in the face. And it's just like I said, it's that weird fantastical nature, but stuff that feels relatable. Even by like the time the film gets to its conclusion, it has the strangest epilogue. But it surprisingly works. It maintains like the weirdness and the odd nature of the comedy within the film. Particularly the way that how Alejandro is like being terrified of the fact that Elizabeth wants to use FileMaker Pro and he has no idea how to use it, and then he realizes nobody does. Just wonderful little humor like that, and just not being afraid to go to all the weird places and embrace that weirdness, I think makes this film works so well. Where even if you don't see like the comparison to like autism and ADHD, it's still a sweet film. It's still got its bizarre and fun, trippy moments. It goes into some bizarre and dark places here and there, and it's just visually wonderful to look at times. So yeah. Problemista, I feel like it for a lot of people, it's going to be a bit of a messy film because it definitely is all over the place a lot. But like I said, that might be on purpose just for how like these characters are framed as not quite having their life all together and always feeling like they're a little bit of an outsider, which is an aspect I absolutely appreciated in this film. Where it's as weird as it is heartwarming, if that makes any sense. I just love Problemista.